if you want to make food more affordable, get to the root cause, which is productivity.
Yeah.
Help people be more productive, help them be more competitive. The world's not going to change. No one owes you anything. So how does farmers, processors and retailers and whoever else is involved in the value chain get better?
I'm Matt Cooper and this is Bite Sides. Welcome to the latest edition of the AusFine Bite Sides podcast.
Yep.
This is a bit of a continuation of the theme. The edition that's just come out, we very luckily had the chairman of Bega Foods in here, Barry Irvin, and we're continuing that theme today and extremely pleased to have Mr. Peter Findlay, the CEO of Bega Foods, in with us today. Pete, welcome, and thanks again for taking the time to come and have a chat.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt. It's great to be in here, and yeah, looking forward to the chat with you.
Absolutely, as am I. It was a really great chat with Barry recently.
He's a hard act to follow.
Well, I must admit, I felt a little inadequate when he gave me his backstory and his extremely humble background and kind of where he's started and where he's managed to get to. Compared to my own, I felt a little, I haven't got nearly as interesting story as that. But let's put that aside, and we will start kind of in that vein with you, Pete. Do you want to just give us a background on where you've come from and where you've grown up and your journey?
Probably not as interesting as Barry's, but I grew up in between Melbourne and Sydney, so most of my time in Melbourne. But Dad worked in Sydney for several years, so sort of my early primary school days were in Sydney, and then went to school here in Melbourne. Started life like a lot of people with financial backgrounds at KPMG.
Yep.
So I was the
proving ground,
the world's worst auditor for a couple of years, and became a chartered accountant there, and then moved into management consulting. So I did a lot of supply chain and strategic consulting with the KPMG management consulting arm, working with large corporates on sort of post-acquisition work, so a lot of sort of integration, synergy, 100-day planning type work, and was really lucky to work with some great partners there. And then from there to Mars Inc., which is sort of one of the largest private companies in the world, still family run, which was fantastic. And from there into sort of private equity owned businesses. Back and then transitioning into around logistics and retail and so sort of still fitting with my supply chain and strategy bent. And then from there into a listed company, Melbourne IT, which was a technology company, which was great. They were sort of on the cusp of a whole lot of digital and cloud work that they were doing. And that was my first listed entity, and they're an international business. And then from there back into private land. So I went and worked for 7-Eleven, which was also one of the largest privately owned Australian businesses owned by a family, the Withers family, and then from there into Bega, so back into listed land. So I guess a lot of work across both private equity, family-owned and publicly listed companies.
Yeah, which is really interesting, such a breadth of experience, and you would have kind of seen it all in that regards of privately held businesses, family businesses, all the way through to a listed company and a sizable listed company that you're steering right now. And I actually do have a couple of questions around that. But just before we get to that, you mentioned in your previous guys there that you helped companies essentially in their integration period. Where companies had bought another company and the first 100 days, I think you mentioned. I've always been interested in that of, I guess, number one, the mechanics of one company absorbing another, which I would imagine would be incredibly difficult, not only from processes and IT, but people and culture as well. What was kind of the biggest challenge that you saw in that integration when you're running through that? Was it processes and IT, or was it people and culture?
I think ultimately people and culture.
Yeah.
Because that's
what I suspect.
That's the longer term view, and yeah, I can talk about that in a little bit of depth because sort of I've been fortunate enough to be involved in probably 15 or 20 transactions in my corporate life outside of that. So just in the companies I've worked for, but it definitely. So I think the two traps corporates fall into is not moving fast enough, quickly enough, and that's around the what I call the sugar hit or the quick wins.
Yep.
And that's actually just, you can't procrastinate. You've just got to get on and you can't have a perfection mentality. You've got to, you've just got to get things moving.
Interesting.
Yep. And then after that initial piece, because it's hard to sort of start to work on the cultural piece until you've got that, the physical, I think, up and running. So, you need to make your decisions around your systems, how you're going to do things, what you're going to keep, what you're not going to keep. We should have already sort of made a lot of those decisions in your pre-due diligence, but you get in and you've almost got to take a smash and grab approach with that and get momentum. And then once you get through that, then you can start to build the culture and merge the culture around that. But it's really hard to start with culture first. And I think a lot of companies procrastinate around making those moves.
Am I hearing this correctly, that it's kind of a little two-speed? First is get the IT and process and everything, that's the focus, and the people and culture integration is a little on a slower speed.
On a slower speed. You can never forget it.
No, of course not.
So never forget it, but you really start to accelerate that as you've got
the kind of mechanics.
Once you've got the mechanics working. Yeah, it would be my view. Interesting.
And have you seen it done exceptionally well? And through, I think you mentioned 20 different guises of or experiences of this mergers and acquisitions. I'm assuming you've seen it at its best and at its worst.
Yeah, I think it's a muscle memory that you have to have within an organisation if you're going to do it. We give it its best chance of success. Mm-hmm. So, Bega's sort of a company that's made up of multiple acquisitions over a 15-year period, and I think that our last acquisition we did 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago now, we bought a business in Tasmania, but it was only a small business, but we effectively integrated that within 3 months.
Wow!
And so and I think we learned the lesson: move quickly, give people clarity. And bed that down, and then what's left over, you then sort of start to really merge into your culture. So you always treat people properly, and you make sure you take your values and behaviours into any acquisition that you do, but go with pace, because I think where I've seen acquisitions fall over is when they're not transitioned or integrated at pace.
Yep. Interesting, and I think that's what you mentioned, muscle memory.
Muscle memory.
No doubt, as you've done it once, you've done it twice, and then into the double digits, you kind of know what you're doing.
Well, you evolve a playbook.
Sure.
And
a team.
And a team. So if we were to do another acquisition now, we've got our strategy team, we've got our synergies team, we've got our engineering team, we've got our people and culture team who can go in and just make those large things happen quite quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So you've just getting back to your backstory.
Yep.
You've gone through a many different company structures and sizes, as we've mentioned.
Yep.
And you come to the big dog, the Bega big in certainly in our world of dairy, and obviously they're now not just dairy; they're across multiple food categories. Yep. What was your initial? So your initial role was operations or CFO?
So my career's progressed through the finance field, always with an operational bent.
Yep.
So I got my first CFO role when I was at Mars, finance director role, as they called it then, and then sort of followed the CFO path into Bega as the CFO.
And your initial take when you first entered the world of Bega Foods, but still very heavily on the dairy side of the world, what was your take on, from your experience of where you've come from and coming into the world of dairy? Was there anything that kind of stood out for you as like, this is a bit of an odd industry?
Oh no, I'd always loved dairy. So I don't know if we've got chance for a slight side story. So
We've always got time for a side, so I love side
my
stories.
great-grandfather left Melbourne in the late 1800s and went to become a dairy farmer in northern Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
And he settled on the banks of the Gunbower Creek, which is still run by my family members today, that original farm. It's called Leven Bray because the family had migrated a generation earlier from Scotland and they lived on the banks of the Leven River, so Leven Bray's bank, so Leven River. So that's sort of been the family, and my grandfather was one of 4 sons that didn't stay. He was the only one who didn't stay dairy farming. He came to Victoria, came down to Melbourne.
Now there is I don't know if you've listened to the Barry podcast, but there is a parallel there.
And he went into banking and was very successful. So a real
so dairy farming into banking, it's a theme.
Yeah, and then one of his sons went back and dairy farmed on the Mornington Peninsula.
Okay,
he was actually the last farmer on the Mornington Peninsula. He supplied the Chelsea plant, which we now.
Yes, you own.
Which we now own. And my father used to spend all of his university holidays working at the Leachfield cheese factory and sometimes into Strathmerton, which we also now own. So so there's sort of a strong link to dairy. So I grew up sort of at my uncle's or cousins' places, wandering around their dairies as a kid, and my dad would often fill in the milk for my uncle.
Yep.
And so
somewhat in the blood.
So somewhat in the blood. So Dad had always had this affiliation with dairying, and then I was the CFO at Melbourne IT at the time, and I was having lunch with some guys, and they said, "Oh, you have family members who are dairy farmers?" I said, "Yes, I do." They said, "Would you be interested in helping us look at a business case? We want to sort of build a." This is back in 2015. They said, "Would you be interested in helping us just build a business case? We want to put together a proposal to build an American barn-style dairy in Australia. We want to raise $100 million and pull together this dairy." And I said, "Yeah, why not?" So I got quite attached to it to the point where I was driving around northern Victoria looking at sites. I reached out to people in America, and I was just, barn experts in America, and I was down at Cobden speaking to guys who built dairies, and in the end I was just reaching out to people in the industry just to try and find stuff. I was amazed at how many people were happy to chat to me, and I rang a guy called someone said, "Go and speak to Ian Halliday at Dairy Australia." So I went and chatted to him, and I was booked in for an hour, and I was talking to him about who I could talk to, and he was giving me all this information, and ended up spending 2 hours with him, and he said, "Oh, you should speak to Bega." And so I worked out who I could speak to at Bega, and I realised I had a connection with a director at Bega, so I went along and spoke to them about this project. Anyway, we got a long way down the track with the project. I built the whole feasibility study and everything, and then Murray Goulburn imploded, and sort of the project ended up getting benched. But about 3 years later, I got a call from a headhunter, and they said, "Look, we're looking for a CFO at Bega, but one of the directors said they met you 3 or 4 years ago when you were chatting about doing a barn-style dairy, and they said that you were quite passionate or quite interested in the dairy industry, and they said we should put you on the list for the CFO role, for the candidature list for the CFO role at Bega." So that's how I ended up meeting Barry and ended up sort of getting involved in Bega. So I'd always had a bit of a feel for a couple of links to dairy. So when the job came up, I was sort of quite excited to be sort of going into the industry. Probably not as excited as some of my family members.
Cheese lovers, I assume.
Well, yeah, they used to ring me up and talk to me about my football team and how they're going. Now they ring me up and talk about dairy price.
Absolutely, it's the hot topic. Again, probably going down a little rabbit hole, and just from what you said earlier, just around that investigation of the American style farming system, which fair to say is more geared towards corporate investment. And huge scale.
Yep.
So thousands of cows on a fairly small footprint, bringing feed in as opposed to our model of 200, 300, 400 cows on a family farm out on pasture. So very, very different. One is super scale, and one is probably not to that scale. Very much reliant on the family legacy and the kids coming on and taking over the family farm. From your experience back in 2015 when you're going through that project, did you see that there was a place for that dairying system in the Australian industry, or was it just too far out there in the way we price milk, and it was hard to attract investment, etc.?
So the short answer is yes, I do. But I think it's like anything in business, you need balance, and you need to exposure to lots of different breadth of supply, because that's what builds a resilient industry. So whilst I think it's great to have, I think I'd love more corporate investment, I'd love bigger corporate farms, but you also need the smaller family farms as well, because I think anything, they all work on different cost structures. They give you the best chance of having a resilient industry. So I'd just park that. I think our big issue is I'm really passionate about Southeast Asia. I think North Asia is always going to have great opportunities with China and Japan, but I look at Southeast Asia, I think of countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines. You could throw Vietnam in there as well, but there's been some really good work done. If you think about the addressable market there compared to Australia, so we talk about, at the moment, there's about 9.4 million families in Australia that have more than $15,000 of disposable income. Mm-hmm. And they're the sorts of families that buy Bega product. Mm-hmm. By 2040, that's estimated to grow to 11.4 million.
Yep.
So that's not bad. That's good organic growth. Those Southeast Asian countries I was talking about, they've got about, their addressable market is about 25 million, let's call it. Families. With $15,000 disposable income, so equivalent of what we've got in Australia. So already they're more than two times the size of the Australian market. By 2040, that'll be about 250 million.
Yep.
So and they're going to want protein, whether it's beef or dairy or whatever it might be, or different forms of protein. And so we in Australia have an outstanding opportunity to provide them with that. You look at some of the production pressures happening in Europe, and Barry, I'm sure, will have talked about this, with what's happening with them closing down their production capability for sustainability issues and all the rest of it, just running out of sheer space. In Australia, if we're smart, we should be able to supply a huge amount of that protein requirement. We're just up the road. They're just up the road in Southeast Asia. So I believe, nothing would excite me more than to see our milk pool grow, back to where it was and beyond at the turn of the century. And so I think that corporate probably has to play a role in that. But as I said, you still want a balance to create a resilient industry. So I think there's still room for the family farm. But we do need to provide corporate incentive there to really keep that moving.
Yeah, that's probably my view as well, that if we are truly going to grow our milk pool, and whilst we didn't necessarily speak about Europe with Barry, the one thing we did talk about was the dairy industry at large, and probably lamenting the fact that we have gone backwards on milk growth, and perhaps there isn't a coherent one voice for the industry as a whole, across processors, dairy farmers, and all the participants in there, of a vision that you're kind of laying out there, which is we've got the ability and the opportunity to feed however many families you mentioned, 250 million families on our doorstep. So I think that, yes, I agree with you that the opportunity is there. It's a matter of whether we can get our act together.
Agreed.
As an industry, and with a coherent messaging that goes across every part of the industry, instead of what we currently have, which is a whole bunch of different aspects of the industry pulling in different directions.
And it is frustrating that we very rarely get balanced views on the industry. So look, every industry has its difficulties. and even out, talking to farmers in Western Victoria, it's really tough out there.
Absolutely.
And we get that, and we try and, we're trying to help and provide a way forward through that. And I think the milk price this year's ended up, hopefully putting most farmers back into a sustainable, profitable position. That would be my view, just looking at the data. But the general discussion in the public arena is all negative. And yet when I go down to Western Victoria and into parts of Gippsland, you've got some terrific stories. I spoke to 5 farmers in Gippsland at one meeting who are all increasing their herd sizes significantly this year and are pinning their ears back. I spoke to a number of farmers in Western Victoria, despite tough years, are all investing, either in land acquisition or increased capability on dairy or herd size, and they're doing some amazing stuff. And so, and yet there are some farmers, and tend to be at the smaller end, who are doing it a bit tough. But I think we need to have a common voice that's at least positive about the industry, and it's probably it's just so negative.
Do you know what? I mean, you're being a leader in across all those companies we mentioned before, and now in Bega Foods, and you would be acutely aware of the need for the impact of culture.
Yep.
The old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and in our experience that is 100% true. And getting back to the industry as a whole, I think it's the culture of negativity and talking everything down, and everything's so hard and everything's so tough out there, and the retailers aren't paying the price, and everything's doom and gloom. And even in the good years, it's still this pale of negativity that's over our industry. But there is so many great stories, as you mentioned. Again, getting back to, I was speaking to someone else in the industry, and they're talking about the town hall kind of dairy farm. And I know this story is specifically about dairy farmers, but I actually don't think it's just them on the cultural view. But they're having a town hall in a local town, and there was people at the front agitating, about it's not enough money, et cetera, et cetera. But in the back row, there was a whole bunch of farmers down there who were doing really, really well, but didn't say anything. And they are super successful, extremely well-run organisations or individual companies. But it was like you needed to reverse the order and bring them to the front to tell their great story that could help the farmers that weren't doing so well.
Yeah, and just get positivity back in the industry. So the number of people I speak to who have built significant asset bases, and many of them started as share farmers. And now own their own properties, and they've bought the place next door, and there's some really good stories of real generational wealth accumulation.
Yeah.
But we never hear any of those.
We just don't. Not enough.
No.
Not enough. And I think that, again, getting back to the culture, I think it might be also an Australian cultural thing of the tall poppy syndrome as well. You don't want to toot your own horn too much, but I think that if you had more examples really highlighted in the industry, both from a dairy farmer perspective, processor, other people involved in the industry, has got this is what can be achieved.
Yep.
Then there would be more aspiration, would be more hope, and it would attract more investment.
Yeah. So I saw my first positive article. It was in the Stock and Land last week. I think it was a positive article. I actually meant to reach out to the person who wrote it. I haven't got her name, but she and her husband have done an amazing job in Western Victoria. And how do you bring those stories to light? We just need to do more of that. But I think, and our debate, even on the recent Coles and Woolworths debates, I think the debate was so shallow in this country around affordability and the food industry and what's happening. If you want to make food more affordable, get to the root cause, which is productivity.
Yeah.
Not just help people be more productive, help them be more competitive. The world's not going to change. No one owes you anything. So how does farmers, processors and retailers and whoever else is involved in the value chain get better? And so once again, I hear people screaming about Coles and Woolies, just get on and get better. And so, and what we don't realise is we're actually going to start to compete against, international the world globalization has taken a little bit of a hit, but fundamentally we're still competing against the countries around us. And so I was in Thailand 6 weeks ago. I went to the best beverage plant I've seen. So better than anything in Australia. I would have thought. Suntory have just built a new canning plant, I think, in Queensland. I haven't seen that. But this was a 500 million litre plant. Schmick. Really schmick. Top gear. Fully automated. We're not talking about a cheap labour plant. Fully automated. I reckon that plant would have taken us 3 to 4 years to build here in Australia by the time you went through all the planning and everything. They built it in 11 months.
Yeah.
And I reckon it would have been at a significantly reduced cost. On a per unit basis, it will smash anything we've got in this country. Now, we're lucky we've got all the product up the road, the raw ingredients. But we've got to get better. We've got to get more productive. And so I see, but we need to be positive about our industry, and we need to stop saying everything's bad and just work on how we improve.
Yeah. 100% agree with you. And that point that you made that no one owes you anything is spot on. In my humble opinion, no one owes you anything. And to be honest, when things don't work out so well for you, no one's really shedding too much of a tear, right? Like they're getting along with in their own life.
Yep.
So you kind of, you build up that resilience, and you work on your productivity, and you go, okay, what can we do better? And again, getting back to that positivity, and just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, around that, I'm still a firm believer that we need a united voice for our industry, not to necessarily beg for government assistance or going back to those days or going back to the retailer saying we demand more money. It is around those stories of how can we be more productive? How can we attract, how can we be an industry that attracts investment to our industry as opposed to it being to be for our other ag sectors? How do we make it a really compelling story that we want investment in our world? Because we, number one, we think it's a great world to be in, but number two, it's got a huge future of feeding not only Australia, but also the greater region that we live in.
And how do you attract bright people?
Yep.
Bright, passionate people. And so that's the other thing that annoys me, because dairy sort of has a stigma to it that it doesn't deserve. So, I think we want to be attracting bright, ambitious people.
Yep.
And the capital that then they generate with them, because they're pushing
and bringing bright new ideas and how can we think outside the box?
How you do things.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'd like to have a bit more positivity. I'd like to pick up a few papers and be a bit more positive.
Yeah, exactly. And a good news story would be nice. And also one where there's a winner and where there's not a winner and a loser, like the conversation around the milk price. So it's either farmers are losing and processors are winning, or vice versa. Farmers are winning and processors. So it's always someone's losing, which is, again, but anyway, we
could go on.
We could go on and on that point endlessly, as we probably have overdone a little bit just there. But getting back to your experience in Bega, and one thing I did want to ask around your experience, because you're coming from a really unique view of being both in, as we mentioned earlier, private businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, and now a large listed business. Are they fundamentally the same at the end of the day?
No, they're not. So more around, I think they've. So for me in my role, I've been really fortunate to work in different models with different owners and different boards and different drivers, and so that's helped me develop a playbook that I now use at Bega. So, and I think that you pluck stuff from your experience, and then you take that into your playbook that you develop for your strategy for your organisation. So I would say that from there are tenets that are similar. So Mars, for instance, the Mars family has a 100-year view. They are like out there, and there's some great, just starting to become some fairly good literature and review of how that business has grown over the last 100 years, and they look right.
Yeah, they are amazing. We do deal with Mars, just very quickly. we deal with Mars, and they're now currently just all about sustainability, and they've, as you mentioned, their views 10, 20, 30, 50 years.
Generational.
Yeah. Amazing. But
And
anyway,
even their financial models around how they want to sweat their asset base and their financial principles that they nearly have been in the business since day dot.
Yep.
And so fascinating when they look at their return on total assets, they look at their profitability, not from a profitability this year, but actually from a long-term profitability that they find sustainable to maintain reinvestment and give back to the consumer. So really interesting piece. It's very difficult in a listed company to have a 100-year outlook because you've got to sell that to shareholders who are buying out of your business all the time. In fact, we get measured on 6 monthly instalments.
Yeah.
So you sort of go from a family-owned business to a public listed company, and then even having worked in private equity, which tends to work on a 3-year time frame, and you look at incremental change in months, not even halves, because the quicker you change the profile of the business, the quicker it can be sold and the better return on investment. So there's a really different sort of set of numbers. So you've got to sort of find the mix that's right for you and your shareholders and your strategy. So at Bega we have our strategy is a 5-year strategy, but it's based on our purpose and vision. So our purpose is great food for a better future, and our vision around that is to be a great Australian food company. So when I go to the purpose looks at the business over the long term. Great food for a better future. And so our job is to produce the highest quality product that meets or exceeds our customer and consumers' expectations every time they buy it, and therefore makes us relevant. And if we do that and do that really well, the vision is to be here in another 126 years' time. Mm-hmm. Because our company's 126 years old this year. And so my job within a 5-year strategy is to manage a capital profile, which will be about $400 or $500 million worth of spend pre-acquisitions. That would go to probably $1 billion if you don't include the acquisition we made of Lion Dairy and Drinks. My role is to manage that over a 5-year period, so I pass the business on to my successor in a better place than what I found it. But also, if over that period we've invested close to $1 billion, that hopefully sets the business up to be in a good position for the next 15 to 20 years.
Yep.
If I've done a good job, if my team and I have done a good job, we hopefully will have the business in a place where it can have the right options available to it over the next 15 to 20 years. And so that's how I tend to look at it. So a 5-year strategy that's developing a profile for today that meets shareholder expectations, but also sets up the right profile, capital profile for the business over the next 15 to 20 years. And so it's then a matter of packaging that up into a 5-year strategy, communicating that to shareholders, and then giving them milestones or street signs that show that you're going in the right direction every 6 months.
Yeah, and it was somewhat of a loaded question because that's what I see from the outside looking in. Yep. Obviously, coming from being in Ozfine forever and small family related business, and our vision is 3 to 5 years out there, and we will do things that don't necessarily result in a great outcome in the current 6 months, but with the vision that we're investing for that time frame. Whereas what I see from a listed company is you get very much that daily scoreboard of the share price. You get the shareholders agitating, some agitating for what have you done for me lately scenario, which can distract you for that, if not run well, I would assume can distract you from that longer vision of what you know is right.
Yeah, so you're always seduced by the share price.
Yep.
And it's really important because it's your shareholders have invested money. So you keep an eye on the share price. But I tend to, what I tend to do is say, this is what I said I was going to do. This is what we said we're going to do over 5 years. This is how I sort of see it playing out in 6-month increments. Mark me on my journey.
As opposed to
what
I've achieved.
And so, like sometimes, like 2 years ago when I sort of first took over, we were working really hard and our share price dropped to $2.39. we were doing everything back then that would eventually set us up for this year where our share price has been at around $5.50. So you just got to stay the course, keep doing what you said you were going to do, stay connected to shareholders, but stay true to your strategy and achieving the outcomes that you want to achieve. So it's just getting that balance right and having a really supportive board and working closely with your board. So it's just communication. Team, nothing's ever linear. This is what we said we're going to do. This is how it's playing out. This is what we're thinking about it. It hasn't quite come yet, or it's come a little bit early, but we're still on track, and keep aligning your operational performance with your strategy. Your strategy is aligned with your shareholders' expectations. Your shareholders' expectations are aligned with your share price. And as I said, it's never linear.
No.
But staying the course on those.
Which can be super difficult, right, to stay the course when you're being somewhat questioned and somewhat attacked through that period, which is kind of gets me to the period around leadership, because you're talking about that experience of $2.39 share price. Now it's doubled, and you got a proof of concept there that it was definitely worthwhile to withstand that pressure and kind of that scrutiny of, no doubt, from shareholders and people in that industry, of investment industry. Getting back to your own leadership views and qualities, etc. Obviously, you've got your internal pressures of things that can go wrong on a daily basis, and sometimes they're small and sometimes they're very big. And no doubt you've had both, of someone coming through your door and close the door and say, Pete, I've got some bad news for you. And no doubt you can feel yourself go white. And then also the outside noise, which is something that I personally don't have to deal with, but you do around that. So your leadership journey, and how do you feel you cope with those scenarios of that ebb and flow of good news and bad news? And being able to withstand that pressure.
Yeah, so I live by the motto, and it's not mine, but in fact I think it's a Kerry Packer motto. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as what it first seems. And so, if you were to believe our guidance this year, which you should because we haven't come off it, we'll have a really good year this year. 2 years ago we had a bad year. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems. There's always challenges in everything you do. And so, I think the challenge is to try and be level through the bad times and the good times. Because as soon as things are really good, there'll always be something.
Just wait, right?
There's always something that's going to come up. The fall's coming, the whack's coming. And when things are really bad, you're not going to, you can turn them. And there'll always be a way through it. So try and stay away from the extremes. That's easier said than done.
It is.
And I think it's something that I've got a lot better with as I've got older. So the 33-year-old me would have reacted very differently to the 53-year-old me.
Yeah.
And I think that as a leader, that's just something you try and develop.
Yeah. And
you take feedback. And how you turn up and how you react and your respond to different things is evolves over time. But I think you've always got to work on that.
Yeah.
And so I do all sorts of stuff to try and improve that. So I do a lot of reflection before the day starts. Mm-hmm. So I walk for an hour and a half before the day starts, and I actually go through my day.
Yep.
I go through the meetings I'm going to have. I go through the personalities I'm going to deal with, and I start to prepare myself for how I will react in those moments, because I know that'll be really important that I show up in the best way possible. And what people don't need from me as a leader is a reaction that sends things the wrong way. Mm. So that's
people are watching, aren't they?
People watch
and take cues.
Yeah, take cues. So I need to understand my weaknesses and how I sometimes come across, and just make sure that I'm still turning up in an authentic way, but turning up in the right way to get the best out of the people around me. And so I think that's a journey for all of us.
Yeah, it is.
And little things help that. So mentors help that. Feedback from your team helps that. Having kids has helped me a lot. Dealing with 14-age kids. if ever you're gonna,
that is going to build resilience.
But they challenge you in the best way.
Oh yeah, because they know you.
They know you.
They know you at your best. They know you at your worst, and they know which buttons to push.
Yeah, and then you realise when you've turned up at your best or your worst for them, and so that's the best way to sort of start to get you to reflect. I think parenting's a fantastic thing for management. So which I try and sit in that space as evenly as I can, and then just because what makes a business great is everyone turning up and being the best they can be, and if they're the best they can be, they'll give you discretionary effort. Yep. And it's the discretionary effort across an organisation that really makes it motor.
It's a great saying. I haven't heard of that, discretionary effort.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot.
That's a really good term. I like that. How do you cope from away from work and you mentioned mentors, etc. But your own, what's your go-to to de-stress and decompress a little bit?
Family time with my 4 sons.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, family time with my 4 sons.
That's what fills your bucket.
It fills my bucket, and friends, close friends. Yeah. So, but just spending time with the kids. I love to get off. I love to break. So I love the outdoors. For me, being outside is a really good break and doing stuff.
Yep.
I'm not a really good sitting person. But then I love work. I think you've got to be engaged with your work. I genuinely love arriving at work each day and getting involved with a team of people. And I say work's no different from a game of sport. Yeah. You're just trying to win. And competing or being out there competing with a bunch of people who energise you is a great way to spend a day.
It is. I do think you need to enjoy it. I think even at its worst, you know, it's challenging, but then you get up the next day and you're energized again and go, okay, let's go. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with the problem. But I do think you at its heart you need to enjoy what you do
and the interactions with people
and the interaction and getting that energy from people. We're actually coming very close to the end.
Sorry, hopefully we've covered enough.
No. This is definitely the direction we want to take these chats is just that, somewhat meandering, but it's been fantastic to hear your take on it, particularly someone coming from, as we mentioned many times, but that different approach before you finally arrived at the dairy industry, although it was that family connection, but just that breadth of view and probably more from, as you mentioned, more the finance side of the business as opposed to operations or the product category. So it's been fantastic to listen to your insights. Just a couple of final questions. I guess getting back to that industry question first, where to from here for the Australian dairy industry? And then as a second question, where to from here for Bega?
Yeah, so I think the Australian dairy industry, amazing opportunities ahead of it to be a protein provider for the region, and therefore, we're good at it, and we should continue to grow it. So I would like to think that the dairy industry now starts to grow. For Bega, both Barry and I are extremely passionate about this. We think we need more great Australian food companies because most of our food is run by large multinationals. Nothing against that. But if you're going to really drive the food and ag industry in this country, you need Australian businesses investing in Australia. And so this is our home, and therefore we want to invest in our home, and this is it for us. We don't have a head office in Chicago or Virginia or China. This is it. And so I'm really passionate about leading the way in creating a great Australian food company that invests back in the industry in Australia and hopefully brings a whole lot of other companies with it.
Absolutely.
Like Osfine, and how do we just create a really strong, vibrant food industry? And I think we've sort of sold our soul a bit anyone that gets to any size and any velocity usually gets picked up by a large multinational. And as I said, that's not the end of the world, and I'm not throwing mud, but how good would it be to have some more great Australian food businesses? So that's my vision for Bega, and I think the team are driven by that.
It's a wonderful vision, and I think it's definitely valid. But as you mentioned earlier in the chat, the opportunity is there for us.
Yep.
It's just whether we seize it.
Yep.
It's built. It's right there.
It's right there.
And we can go one or two ways. We can kind of shrink, or we can go and grab it.
I completely agree.
Yeah, Pete, thank you very much once again. I know you're a very busy man, so I'm sure in your hour and a half walk this morning you weren't necessarily thinking too much about this, but I do appreciate your investment and your stories and your insights today are very much appreciated. Thank you for joining us at the AusFind Bite Sides podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt.